All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Good morning and welcome to the first episode of All Indiana Politics of the year 2025. I'm Garrett Bergquist in for Phil Sanchez. In 4 days, America will say goodbye to its 39th president. Jimmy Carter died 1 week ago today at the age of 100. Preparations are underway for his state funeral in Washington. Carter will lie in repose at the Carter Presidential Center in Atlanta until Tuesday. He then will be transferred to the U.S. Capitol, where he will lie in state until Thursday morning. The national funeral service will be at Washington National Cathedral on Thursday. He will be interred at his residence in Plains, Georgia, Thursday evening. Former Indiana Congressman Lee Hamilton was on the House Foreign Relations Committee when Jimmy Carter was president. As such, he had a front row seat to some profound changes in American foreign policy. I sat down with Hamilton to talk about Carter's legacy.
And I think on one of his trips to Washington in 1976 was the first time I met him.
Lee Hamilton had represented southeastern Indiana in Congress for 12 years when Jimmy Carter was elected president.
Carter was a very successful candidate. He captured the mood of the country.
Now a professor at IU's Hamilton Lugar School, at the time, Hamilton chaired the House Subcommittee on Europe and the Middle East. Most of his experience working with the 39th president revolved around those issues rather than legislation.
I enjoyed working with him because I like to see a well-prepared president, and he certainly was that. Carter was always well-prepared. I don't think I ever saw him go into a meeting when he had not mastered the brief. And I think he had, because of his own skills, I guess, a lack of patience, if you would, with other people.
The Middle East would come to define Carter's presidency. Hamilton's service overlapped Carter's work on the Camp David Accords between Egypt and Israel. He says Carter was the first president to seriously consider Palestinians' views on the Arab-Israeli conflict. That sometimes put him at odds with Congress.
Carter was pretty good at keeping in touch with members of Congress on issues, but he was not so good at listening to them. Carter's high intelligence drove him to look for a solution to a problem. And he was good at that. What he was not good at was dealing with people who didn't agree with him.
Hamilton says that stubbornness meant Carter had trouble with the day-to-day give and take of governance.
He never seemed to master the art of government. Now, we ought to say that it was a very difficult time. Vietnam, inflation, unemployment.
Hamilton would serve in Congress until 1999, but by 1981, Carter was gone. Hamilton says Carter's post-presidency will be his true legacy.
He was clearly one of our most successful ex-presidents. He redefined the job, in a sense, of being an ex-president, and made it difficult for any ex-president not to engage more than they have traditionally done.
As for the presidency itself, Hamilton says Carter was the first to prioritize environmental and energy issues, and he made a big change to our foreign policy.
Human rights is what he'll be known for most of all. He made human rights a major plank in American foreign policy. That's not going to change. And Jimmy Carter deserves credit for that.
Carter was the last surviving member of a series of presidents from Harry Truman to George H.W. Bush who all served in the armed forces, and he was the only president to date to serve on submarines. Hamilton told me, unlike many politicians, Carter never leaned on his military service during a campaign. And closer to home, state lawmakers are lining up legislation for the 2025 session. There is already legislation to enact property tax freezes of various configurations. There is also a proposal to repeal sales taxes on feminine hygiene products. Democrats again plan to push legislation to raise teacher salaries and to expand eligibility for On My Way pre-K. Also on deck, a ban on transgender women on women's college sports teams. That bill is by the same lawmaker who wrote Indiana's ban on transgender girls on girls K through 12 teams. The measure also would require any out-of-state teams to provide at least 60 days notice if they have a transgender player on their roster. That notice would have to go to the coach, the athletic director, and every member of the team. LGBTQ rights groups say that forcibly outs transgender players and puts their safety at risk. The bill's supporters say this is about fairness and safety for cisgender women athletes.
It doesn't stigmatize. It recognizes it's based on science. It's based on biology, which has to be recognized. I mean, we can't just wish biology away. We have to recognize that it has an impact.
They've set this argument with people with race. They've set this argument with people with different religion. They set this argument with gender. So now we're doing it with transgender and everything. Just grow up. It's time to grow up and see people for people.
The legislative session begins on Wednesday. It's scheduled to run until April 29th at the latest. Coming up, Indiana's best political team assesses Jimmy Carter's legacy and looks ahead to the 2025 legislative session.
Looking for ways to save on your energy bills? AES Indiana has you covered. From smart thermostats to home energy assessments, we offer simple solutions to keep your home comfortable and your costs down. AES can help you save money and energy with kits, tips, rebates, and more. Visit aesindiana.com/ways to save to learn more about how we can help you save money. AES Indiana, helping you discover real ways to save.
Welcome back to All Indiana Politics as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Democrat Dana Black and Republican Whitley Yates. Let's begin with a look back to the last big political headline of 2024. Former President Jimmy Carter died just before the new year at the age of 100. So this first question is for both of you. How should we remember the 39th president? Dana, you go first.
Absolutely. I think we should remember him as a president who lived up to his values and his faith. He didn't get everything right. He was not a perfect president, but there is no one that is. But he believed in ending racial discrimination. Because he was an engineer who graduated from the Naval Academy, he believed in trying to fix problems. He was successful at passing over 70% of the legislation that he put forth to Congress. He established FEMA and the Department of Energy. Now, we can't look over the fact that the Iran hostage crisis happened on his watch. And unfortunately, because of the oil embargo, our country went through a crazy recession, so that all of that happened on his watch as well. But he also appointed more females to the judiciary than any other president up to that point, including the future Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg. But post-presidency, again, he lived his faith. He believed in humanity. He believed in giving back to people and working with Habitat with Humanity. He was housing people with the Carter Center. He was able to work on eradicating diseases around the globe. He believed in service and he believed in his fellow man. And I hope that we, continue to realize how powerful and impactful his love for humanity was, and that we see other politicians in either party replicate his desire to love on humans.
Whitley, how do you believe Jimmy Carter should be remembered?
I think as a person, he'll be remembered as a global citizen, but a problematic president. And when you talk about some of the things that happened, not only during his administration, but the way in which he consistently inserted himself into international issues, which a lot of times would handcuff the current administration because of his level of activity and advocacy, it does present problematic. But in the totality of his life, it's not for us to eulogize, whether that be to laud or lambaste him.
I will add, though, when you talk about him interjecting himself in international affairs, the Egyptian-Israeli peace treaty is still in place, and that is huge. And maybe he shouldn't have inserted himself in every situation, but in this case, when he did insert himself in it, the world was better because of it.
That is your belief. I do strongly believe that's what you believe. But I think that we have many different areas, specifically looking at Jimmy Carter's relationship with former President Obama, where there was strained relationship because of his intentionality to insert himself in global conflicts.
Well, we see that happening now, so I understand why that could seem problematic, because we see Trump, who hasn't even been inaugurated yet, has been inserting himself for the last 4 years. But again, in the totality, I believe that we'll remember him as maybe not the greatest president, not having the greatest presidency, but a great human.
A great global citizen. I think we should put a pin in it right there.
Yeah.
I agree.
Let's go ahead and turn to the year ahead now. So state lawmakers will gavel in on Wednesday. We have a new administration and a new budget. Whitley, Governor-elect Mike Braun has called for raising teacher pay in a financially sustainable way. That's the way he's put it to me. From what you've been seeing, what form might that take?
I'm really glad that Governor-elect Mike Braun has decided to really tackle teachers' pay and want to do something that is fiscally sustainable, which is very, very important. And the way that we maintain fiscal sustainability is that it is not dependent wholly on what the General Assembly is going to do, but how in which we manage the finances that the state of Indiana has. But addressing teacher pay and looking at how we are equipping, supporting, and training teachers in the state of Indiana is a top priority for this administration. And I'm very excited to see the way in which they will sustainably have a path of succession for teachers.
Dana, Democrats already are filing their own bills to raise teacher pay. And I've got about 90 seconds left in this segment. How likely is it we will see a deal on that this year?
I would hope so. I mean, my goodness, our teachers are at the bottom scale in the nation, and we keep talking about, we want to churn out these exceptional humans who are going to be ready and prepared for the work that's needed in the future. But if you don't invest in the people who are actually teaching the young people, then you will not achieve that goal. So I hope he's successful, and I hope that we can get to some sort of compromise, because I haven't seen that this body has ever really wanted to address it to begin with. So hopefully this is a change.
All right, so we will leave it there for a moment. When we come back, we'll address property taxes and much more coming out of the pike for 2025. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics. Still with us are Democrat Dana Black and Republican Whitley Yates. Let's turn to taxes, and especially property taxes. Dana, your party's nominee warned against changing property taxes in a way that jeopardizes local funding for emergency services and schools. Do the proposals we're seeing so far for the session that begins this coming Wednesday pose that risk, and how should lawmakers avoid it?
So I'm not going to say they actually pose a risk, but I think it will always be problematic when we try to tinker with the funding for localities and then not give them the support that they need. We have seen across the state, even in smaller communities, where they've had massive floods and infrastructure issues and then not received the funding that they needed from the state to actually address it because the tax revenue wasn't there. So I'm going to hope and pray that these guys, I'm not a fiscal tax policy wonk, so I don't have the answer to all of that. But I do hope that they look at it clear-eyed and recognize that if you take money away from the localities, they will be handcuffed and they will not be able to get done what they need to get done.
Whitley, the legislature's Tax Review Commission ultimately had very few concrete recommendations beyond some changes to the property tax system. Does a lack of specifics from the commission mean we might not see significant changes to either property or income taxes this year?
I don't believe that that's necessarily true. I think what we've witnessed over the past 4 years through Biden inflation is that the price of homes skyrocketed, and through the price of the skyrocketing homes, so did the valuation of many people's property, which some people say, oh, that's a wonderful thing. But when you're paying that property tax bill and it's increased thousands of dollars, it makes it hard for everyday Americans that are fighting to just survive, specifically some of the most vulnerable populations like my grandfather in our elderly community. So I definitely think looking at some of the homestead exemption changes and taxes that have been already submitted in the Indiana General Assembly are going to be vetted, but also getting very creative about ways in which we are taxing not only our properties, but our income tax without choke holding or having the taxes really just take hold and reduce the amount of services that are provided through not only schools, but like she was saying, infrastructure and public safety dollars.
Earlier in this show, I mentioned a new effort by Republicans to ban transgender female athletes from women's college sports teams. This is certain to cue up another fight over social issues. Whitley, first, does this suggest social issues will come to dominate this session? And second, do Republicans in the General Assembly and in Congress, for that matter, risk overplaying their hand if they focus on social issues?
Absolutely not. I think this is a women's rights issue, and I think that it being something that has been submitted this early is important. And the truth is, women do not want to be in locker rooms and playing sports with biological men. This is not about hormones. It's about chromosomes. And I think what's important right now for Indiana is to make sure that they're safeguarding women's sports and protecting women at all costs.
Dana, I'll let you respond, but I also want to turn the question I asked Whitley on its head. Did Democrats overplay their hand on social issues over the past few years?
Absolutely not. And I'd like to look at this transgender issue from a very different perspective. One is we have intersex people, so many intersex people. There are as many intersex people as there are redheads in America. And what we need to address is the non-consensual gender assigning, non-medically necessary surgeries that we are giving infants, toddlers, and young adults. So what happens then? When you have intersex folks, you have a 50-50 chance of getting it right? So now we allow these doctors to give these surgeries to these infants and children, and guess what? They get it wrong. Intersex people tell us every time they do one of these surgeries, we lead to more people being transgender. So now we're going to punish them 15 years later because a doctor did a medically unnecessary surgery on a young person, and now we're going to write legislation to say, oh, they got it wrong, so we're going to punish you. I think before we pass any more anti-transgender legislation, we need to ban medically unnecessary gender assigning surgeries to infants, toddlers, and young adults.
We've got a little bit of time left. What's one topic we haven't talked about that you believe we need to watch carefully in the 2025 legislative session? Dana, you go first.
We haven't talked about Medicare yet. There's a desire to curb the increased costs of Medicare and Medicaid. I should say Medicaid. These benefits help people whose families have children with severe health issues. We already have seen, because of people can't add in the State House, that families are suffering. So I think we need to address how we make sure that we take care of the people, the most vulnerable among us, because if we don't, we're going to have people who are suffering.
Whitley, what do you think we need to watch for besides the topics we've mentioned already?
Along that vein, I would say the price of pharmaceuticals, as well as the transparency of hospitals, as well as pharmaceutical companies when it comes to the price of their medicines. This is something that Brian has talked about extensively. And so I do believe that we will be seeing some type of legislation that is making medicine more affordable, pharmaceuticals more affordable, and the price of healthcare more transparent, so that you can utilize competition to drive down prices to get the best care for you and your family.
Let's turn to federal policy, for a moment. I got about 90 seconds left. President Joe Biden blocked Nippon Steel's acquisition of U.S. Steel. U.S. Steel runs the Gary Works. So that blocks foreign ownership for now, but it leaves U.S. Steel facing an uncertain future. Whitley, was this the right call?
I do believe it's the right call to have less foreign owners in America, specifically of those types of assets in industries, steel, manufacturing, as well as some agriculture. Now, this does not provide a solution to the root cause, which is what we need, is how we are supporting American businesses.
Dana, same question to you. Did President Biden get it right in this case?
I think so. So we're going to start this show off with Whitley and I agreeing, and we're going to end the show with Whitley and I agreeing. The union opposed this transaction. Whitley is absolutely right. We need to invest in American businesses and not continue to sell pieces of America off to foreign entities. Eventually, we won't own anything. We're already having the fight over the H-1B visas and who comes in. Now we're selling off U.S. companies to foreign entities again. We need to take pride in ownership and figure out ways to solve problems to keep these businesses open so that people don't lose their jobs.
Right.
I agree. We're not outsourcing the American dream.
That's it.
Well, I guess we better quit while we're ahead. Dana and Whitley, thank you so much. Happy New Year, and we will be right back.
Happy New Year.
Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. Be sure to tune in this Thursday for our special coverage of former President Jimmy Carter's state funeral. We will be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And if you're looking for a New Year's goal for the year, be sure to check out our podcasts on the All Indiana Politics section of our website, wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.